We'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you all for taking time to listen to our presenters tonight. Columbia is going through a rewrite of our zoning ordinance, also integrating the subdivision regulations inside of that. The importance of that is basically it's the physical development of our community as we grow. We went through a very rigorous process and selection with on-site presentations also. And we have selected, the team itself selected Town Planning Urban Design Collaborative. And from a consultant standpoint, they're actually fairly close, just right in Franklin, Tennessee, which is pretty unusual. Most consultants are a state or two away. So they're very familiar with Columbia, which is a big plus in our standpoint. And I think you'll be thoroughly impressed with their effort in this project and the outcome of that. And we have two co-presenters here tonight, Brian Wright and Becky Timmons, and I'll turn it over to them.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. So appreciate everybody jumping on tonight. I know you may have had other things you're hoping to do on this nice Monday night rather than talk about zoning, but I'm glad you came nonetheless. My name is Brian Wright. I'm the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. And as Paul mentioned, I have Becky Timmons with me, and Becky's going to talk a little bit at the end about kind of next steps and what's going on. And after we run through this presentation, we're going to do a question and answer session. And so Becky will tell you how to do that. And try not to keep you on here too long because, you know, at the end of the day, like I said, this is talking about zoning and tends to be a dry subject, but we do our best to try to make it exciting. It's a little bit unusual doing a kickoff presentation like this on the computer or on the telephone, and but we've gotten good at it over the years. So it's not unusual for us, but maybe the first time for some of you. So when we get into the question and answer session, Becky will explain how you can participate in that. So I will go ahead and get started.
One thing to note, Brian, if I can interrupt, is that this presentation is being recorded. So if you miss anything, if your internet goes out, we are recording, and we will post the recording on the website later this week.
Yes, that's a great point, Becky, because one thing that I've learned over the countless Zooms that we've done, certainly here in the past several months, but over the past several years, is, you know, they oftentimes are, you know, have some little technological issue, especially if you're new to it. So don't fear. We've taken precautions to make sure no one will miss a moment of this. So, all right, Becky, can you see my screen? Great. So I'll do some introductions here real quick. So as I said, my name is Brian Wright, and working on this zoning ordinance update. It won't just be me. I have a team of people with me who will be working on different parts and pieces of this. Bill Wright happens to have my same last name because he's my father. We get to work together, and it's exciting. He's a land use attorney, and so he specializes in really getting into the details of the code language, because at the end of the day, zoning is really a legal document. So it's important to have that background rather than just having planners and people who are more dreamy, visionary kind of people working on this. Becky will be the project manager, and she will run through and the whole project, making sure that we stay on task, on time, and make sure that this thing turns out to be a great process and product for everybody. We have Jessica Beekler. Jessica will be working with Becky to assist in all the various things that need help throughout the process, and also working on some planning and design components along with Keith Covington. Keith will be working on some planning, and then Gortza is our graphic designer, and so she'll help make sure that the zoning document is easy to look at, nice to use, so that it's not overwhelming and too complicated. So one of the things, as Paul mentioned, for us, this is really exciting and ironic. We work all over the country, and even though we're in Franklin, we don't get to often work around here. And so here we are doing a local project that we don't have to get on an airplane to come meet with you all and talk to you. But here we are nonetheless on Zoom. So it's kind of a strange situation. But it is nice because as Paul said, we know the city a little bit, not too much, so that we come in with preconceived notions about how things ought to be. But unlike most of the projects we work on, we are familiar with the community. So we work on zoning ordinances for cities and towns and villages all over the country. We also work on comprehensive plans, and we work on development projects for private developers using our design expertise and our rezoning. You get things rezoned and things. So the thing that's nice about that is that we can, while we really most importantly want to understand what is, what's important to you guys in Columbia, but also bringing ideas from other places we've worked, things that worked well, things that didn't work, lessons learned. And so that's going to be hopefully a real benefit to you guys. But as we go through this, it's going to be important for us to not just sort of, try to do whatever we did in the last project and, we were working on something in New York, or we worked on something and we actually recently wrote the new zoning ordinance here in Franklin. So our most local project ever. But we know that Columbia isn't Franklin. And so we can't just do what we did in Franklin for you guys. And so that's going to be important for you guys to help us with that. And that's really what this slide is all about, partnering with the community. We have the national experience and some local expertise. But at the end of the day, this is your city, and we have to make sure that, you all are really leading this process and what goes into it. You're the experts on Columbia in a way that we never can be. And so we're just really, in some ways, while we have specific expertise about writing zoning ordinances and public process and all that, we don't have any preconceived notions about what it's supposed to be. We're an impartial third party to help you guys really start to articulate what it is you want to see in the future. Now, this project is sort of being branded as Columbia for you. So character, proportion, pattern, and principles. Looking at some of those things that are going to be, really the essence of this zoning ordinance update. We want to make sure that in the future you're getting high quality development, the development that you want to see. But also, it's not all about development. There's, some places want to just be like they are, and they want to be preserved or enhanced. So it's not all about trying to make things different and change everything. We've in most cities we work in these days, but also we've heard specifically in Columbia, people are looking for some more walkable pedestrian environments, neighborhood connectivity, some mixed-use centers, a variety of different housing types and civic spaces and community amenities. And so those are some of the things that we'll learn more about and see where you guys fit in that, how important these different parts and pieces are. And, some places we work, it depends on the person even. It's not just a citywide idea. So some people may say, oh yeah, we really do want some more walkable neighborhoods. We love walking around downtown and we've been to other, neighborhoods that you can walk around in, and we like some more of that in new development. And other people say, why would I want to walk somewhere? That's the last thing I want to do. And so we have to make sure that we're not just thinking of everybody as the same. We have to make sure there's something for everyone. Now, I like to show this image at the beginning of a project. I don't know how many of you have ever even looked at your current zoning ordinance, how many of you really are excited about zoning. Most of the time, people who participate in these kind of planning processes fall into a couple of categories. Unfortunately, a lot of times the biggest category is people who are scared. They're afraid that you're about to change something with the zoning ordinance and you're going to mess up the city. And I can see that because a lot of times, you know, things happen in a city. And again, because we work all over the country, we get to see it. It's not any one place's issue. It's a lot of, in most places we work, development happens. It's not like somebody hoped it would be. And they say, well, how did that happen? And, you know, city says, well, it met the zoning ordinance. And you say, oh, shoot, well, that's no good. I must not like the zoning ordinance. And so one of the things that I'll say is, you know, when you look at this image, there's two things that could be happening. Either these guys are just banking the plane, they're coming in for a landing, they know exactly what's going on, or if you could see their faces, they may be going, and they're, you know, they're, you know, crashing, and it's who knows what's going on. Well, it's kind of like that at the beginning of a process. A lot of times people come in and they don't know kind of what to expect. And so what I always say is, using the plane analogy, don't feel like you have to learn how to fly the plane through this process. You don't have to become an expert on zoning. All you need to know, like when you get on an airplane, you need to know where you're going, right? Where you want to go in the future. You need to know where your seat is, so make sure you're in the seat and able to be part of the flight. Usually it's important to know where the bathroom is, but since we're all at home, it's probably pretty easy. But then you have to just understand that, you know, in the back of that seat in front of you isn't the manual on how to fly the plane. It's for, you know, sort of only the worst case scenarios, kind of, you know, looking at that. Here's what happens if things don't go well. Well, what I want you all to do is be able to sit back and relax and enjoy the flight, and just trust that we've got you all, you know, we've got it under control, and we're not going to come in for a crash landing. That said, if you start feeling turbulence, let us know. Push that flight attendant button and let us know that you know, you're feeling like things aren't heading in the right direction, or whatever. That's why we partner with the community. As I said earlier, you guys hold us accountable to make sure that everything's going in the right direction. So for those of you who aren't experts on zoning and don't know how to fly the plane yet, I'll give you a little bit of an update here. So the zoning all comes from the comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan is called a framework plan, Connect Columbia, and it's you know, a long-range planning document that establishes a vision for the city and provides policy guidance for growth and development and conservation. And they, you know, comprehensive plans contain action items that are directed to implement the vision for the future. The Connect Columbia framework plan really is about responding to increasing development pressure. It's, you know, guiding that future development. And there are 3 components to it: the land use plan, the transportation plan, and the parks and greenway plan. So if you haven't spent any time looking at that, those documents, I suggest that you, if you want to, that you take a look at them, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. Sort of big picture, big ideas. You've got the Connect Columbia framework guiding principles. So sense of place, safe and sound, recreation hub, healthier, environmental stewardship, connected Columbia, dynamic, and neighborly are some of those big picture guiding principles. And as you can see, each of those has their specific explanation, and in the plan itself, in the framework plans, it gets into more detail about that. And so a lot of what we're doing here is really just, you know, writing the zoning to begin to execute and implement the vision that is in that adopted plan. So some of the things that are going to be talking about, really just taking as a given. The plan says this, so here's what we're doing. So we've got selected priorities in the plan. There's looking at adopting a proactive access management standards, revising the PUD, which is a plan unit development, and the adoption process, looking at consolidating, updating, and streamlining, and focusing on adopting revised design criteria to respond to character and specific corridors in different parts of the city. And making sure that, you know, when you have infill development, that it's going to respond to the context, where it is, so it doesn't look like you just, an alien ship just landed. And then promoting a variety of housing opportunities as well. So there's what's called a future land use map, and that future land use map in the comprehensive plan says, in the future, as its name says, here's some land uses that would be acceptable in these different areas. So if somebody comes in and is looking to have something rezoned, you would look at the comprehensive plan and say, well, what does the comprehensive plan say about how somebody's suggesting changing the zoning? Is it in keeping with that vision for the future? So that's the comprehensive plan level. And then kind of zooming into a little bit to the zoning. The zoning is really the way that the city organizes itself. It uses zoning to group land into different areas or zones with different rules about what you can do in each of those zones and what you can't do as well. So it doesn't cause anything to be built. So what we're doing through this process isn't causing anything to be built. It's really just setting those rules and regulations for when something does get built. Here's what it needs to be like. To a certain extent, at a high level. It doesn't get super into the details of exactly what has to be done on every piece of property, but it starts to create some guardrails and some limits of what people can do in those zones. Now that said, you already have zoning. The whole city is zoned, and so nothing we're doing is adding some sort of regulation that you don't have. We're just updating the zoning ordinance through this process. So you say, well, why do we want to update the zoning ordinance? Well, most cities we work in, the zoning ordinance has some date on it, has some age on it. And so we kind of, knock the dust off of it. We clean it up, we organize it, and we go through and try to make sure that it is very carefully doing everything it needs to do to make sure that vision for the future actually can happen. And that vision is what's in that comprehensive plan, the Connect Columbia plan. So when we modernize the code, and that's zoning ordinance, we call it a code sometimes, you'll hear those words used interchangeably. What we're doing is looking to protect the most loved parts of the city. We want to enhance areas that need improvement. We want to create more predictable outcomes. So what we hear in every city we work in is that developers say, please, can you just make a process that I know what's expected of me up front, what the rules are. Even if the rules are more strict than they are right now, I'll follow them as long as I know what they are. And then on the other hand, the citizens are saying, can you please just make it where every time somebody goes to pull a permit to do something or wants to do a new development, we're not all sitting there worried to death what it's going to be like because we don't know what to expect. So creating more predictable outcomes becomes important for everyone. We want to make sure that we are, creating something for everyone and that everything has its place. So there's no one size fits all. And this is one of the things that I always talk to people about is say, look, there may be things, using that example I talked about earlier, walkability, walkable neighborhoods or something. So you may say, that sounds like the most exciting thing that anyone's ever said to me. I can't wait to have a walkable neighborhood. And other people may say, that sounds like the worst idea that I've ever heard. Why would you want to walk? Now, the people who think it's great shouldn't necessarily be able to make it where every place has to be like what they want. And the people who don't want that shouldn't necessarily have the city have to be only like what they want. And so we want to make sure that there's a place for everything and for everybody. One of the things that's important today, especially as you grow, you start noticing you'll have some traffic congestion and those sorts of things. And so the zoning ordinance can balance the different modes of transportation. We have the opportunity, because you guys have become such a desirable place to be, which is, as we've heard from people, is a blessing and a curse. If you don't like change, then you may not be too excited about it. But if you like the change that's happened, you may be excited that it's been happening. But nonetheless, with that growth and with the change comes the opportunity for economic enhancement of the community. So if we're going to grow, let's make sure that, it's really beneficial to everybody, not just the new people who are moving in. So we want to try to find ways to enhance the economic viability of the city. And then from a planning staff perspective and the developers and for, even the citizens who are, interested in a particular development, want to make sure that the new zoning is easier to use and to administer. You wouldn't believe, you think, well, the planning department, surely the zoning ordinance is easy for them. And every city we go in, they say, oh, thank heavens, we've been waiting so long to do the zoning ordinance update. It's really a challenge for us to use our existing ordinance. So part of the process of modernization will be somewhat scientific. We start off by doing what we call synoptic surveys, which means we actually go out into the field, into the city, and we have a measuring wheel. We get on the computer and using GIS and Google Maps and Google Earth and stuff, and so we'll go around and we'll actually document what are the we talk about the DNA of any given part of the city. So people say, oh, this is our favorite part of the city, or this is our favorite neighborhood, or here's why we love downtown. We'd like to see some more of that kind of stuff. And so if you just look at the zoning ordinance, in most cities we work in, the zoning ordinance wouldn't actually give you the things that you love the most about the city. And so we actually have to go and study in the field and see what it is that people are so excited about. And then that actually becomes part of the basis for the new zoning ordinance. So when you look at a setback of a building, for instance, you say, well, why is the setback on a single family house, 23 3/4 feet? I don't know why it is. I just made up that number, by the way. And yet, you even ask the planning department, why is it like that? I don't know. It was like that when I came here. You ask elected officials, I don't know. Maybe it goes back to, back in the day. And so what we like to say is, well, here's why those dimensions are what they are. Here's why the heights are set how they are. Here's because we documented it through our synoptic survey process. Then we go on and we do a zoning translation. And so nearly every place we go, one of the big things that we're doing is trying to simplify the ordinance so that it gets back to the easier to use and administer and more predictability. And so over the years, zoning ordinances are tweaked and adjusted. I always joke around about, I think it's maybe even in Franklin, where they were, for a few years ago, the big thing was getting backyard chickens, even in regular suburban neighborhoods. Everybody wanted to have their own eggs, and so somebody comes in and they ask to get a permit or something, and they say, we can't do that. Your lot's bigger than 1.67 acres, and we say, 1.67 acres, what's up with that? And they say, well, a few years ago, there was that person and they had those roosters. They were supposed to get chickens, but they didn't realize the roosters are noisy and chickens aren't. And, they had 1.66 acres. And so we set the zoning ordinance to make sure you couldn't have chickens on a lot that was the same size as theirs. And so you get all these little kind of weird bits and pieces that tell a story sometimes of the history of the city's zoning, but also can lead to a mess. And so we're going in and trying to simplify all that, and through our translation process, we'll get there. Then we are also looking at all of the existing documents that regulate land. And so we mentioned the framework plan, access management, and their subdivision regulations, and the zoning ordinance itself. And so we're trying to find all the different documents that tell people what they can and can't do with their property, and we're trying to bring them all together so you don't have to go on a scavenger hunt to figure out what you can do and what you can't do. And so one of the things that we've done so far is gone through and studied the existing ordinance and really started to evaluate it and assess how it's currently set up. Is it easy to use? Is it meeting goals in the comprehensive plan? All those kind of things. And so we've been looking at that. So I'm going to share with you a little bit. I mean, this really is this kickoff. It's called the kickoff for a reason. This really is the real beginning for us. But we've been able to talk to a few people so far, just to pick their brains, and so we don't come in completely cold. But we kind of like to. So you may ask us a question tonight that we don't know the answer to yet. A lot of consultants would, say, oh, they'll just make up something, sounds smart. But, if we don't know yet, we're going to tell you we don't know. And that's why you're here, because you guys are all part of the team. But what we have heard so far, when we ask people what they like most about Columbia, Downtown. Oh my goodness. If I heard downtown once, I heard it 1,001 times, which is great. It's always wonderful when there's a place that everybody gets excited about. Now, some people say, it's a little different than it used to be a few years ago. And they say, but I guess that's okay because it means there's, not vacancies and stuff. So that's good. We heard people really like the parks, the arts community, all the historical sites, restaurants and microbreweries, the vibrancy, the walkability that you do have. We've heard a lot of people say they really love the influx of young families. We've, a lot of places we go, sometimes people, starting to, we work a lot in the Northeast, and so if you look there, people, cities and towns are aging faster than most places, and they're not getting new families in. And so at first, a lot of places say, "Oh man, this is different. It's getting a little louder here." It's in, but then people start to realize that it really is about the self-sufficiency and the making sure that the community can carry on, and you have that excitement of what the sort of regeneration and rebirth with the young families that come in. We've heard there's a lot of support for local businesses, that's really a Columbia thing. People love the small town feel. There's lower housing prices than Nashville and Williamson County. We know they're on the rise, but good utilities, less traffic and less fast pace, and it probably goes with the small town feel. But you have good access to I-65, so you can get wherever you need to pretty easy. So that's all good stuff. We asked, what are challenges that are facing the city? And they said, with that growth, it's kind of hard to stay ahead of it, to really be proactive instead of reactive. And so that's something that we're going to hopefully help with. We heard the rising cost of development. Things, get more expensive the more desirable a place gets, and the more the land is starting to be, used up. We've heard that you get out-of-town developers who don't really get Columbia. Sort of it's just another community they're doing one of their projects in, and it's not, Columbia. We've heard about the lack of connection of neighborhoods, between neighborhoods. So even if you're nearby, you can't necessarily even easily walk somewhere. So you have to get in your car to go do nearly anything. Then we've heard, along those lines, needing more sidewalks and bike trails. And, once we do that, if you can get some of those things in, and the zoning doesn't necessarily make that happen, but it's, part of what's in your comprehensive plan. But once you can get people moving around, not only in a car, but other ways, like on foot or on a bike, then you can start to deal with some of the road safety and congestion issues that we heard about. And then we also heard there needs to be some improved coordination between the city and the county. That's not unusual at all. That's not a Columbia thing, but we did hear it, so we wanted to report that. And then people want to make sure that we're providing high quality services while keeping taxes low. Again, not a zoning thing specifically, but knowing that that's important, and we can think about the unintended consequences, if you will, of any decisions that we make through this process. And so one of the things we'll do is challenge communities that we work in. And people say, well, I'd like to see that. I'll give you a good example. People a lot of times say, I don't want any more growth, and I want my taxes to stay low. I say, okay, well, at a minimum, you have the increased costs over time, just inflation and stuff. And so if we don't grow at all, then the only way to accommodate for that is to have higher taxes. And so we were working in Pinehurst, North Carolina. If you're familiar with Pinehurst, it's a really cool historic little town, but it's famous for golfing. It's like where golf came to America, really. And but lots and lots of retirees live there. And so they were saying, we don't want any more growth. We want to keep our taxes low. And so we had conversations when we were working on their comprehensive plan about, should the growth rate equal the death rate? And so you're only allowing one in when one goes out, or, which is kind of a morbid thought, but or do we need to figure out how much the cost of services increase over time? And so we only will allow enough people to make up for that. And so it's, you get into some of those discussions as you move forward in a project like this. Again, zoning not so much, but so what should the goals be of the new zoning ordinance? We asked people. People talked about making sure that we're consistent with the comprehensive plan, number one, and that is, every zoning ordinance should be doing that as its first and foremost thing. Want to ensure a high quality built environment. So when you do get development, if you do get growth, you're glad you got it. It's like, well, we had to, have some change. We had to get some new people. At least it's a place we're proud of and we're excited about, and it's added to the value of our community and the image of the city. Really want to and make sure that the new zoning ordinance distinguishes Columbia from neighboring communities. So everybody, we like Franklin, but we don't want to be Franklin. So, we like Spring Hill. We like to go, to this and that Spring Hill has, but we don't want to be Spring Hill. And so how do we make sure that we're not just doing something that's generic? And so that's something that we really focus on a lot. And we're going to count on you all to help us make sure that we do a good job in that regard. Have clear, predictable outcomes and be user friendly. We heard from people enabling high quality mixed use development, not everywhere, but where it's appropriate to have mixed use, easy to administer, reduce subjectivity in the review and approval process. And so this goes back to what are the rules, make sure they're clearly stated so that it's not a matter of every new project is sort of like you come in and have to bargain and barter for what you can and can't do. And that helps get you that predictability at the end of the day. Simplify the development review process is a goal that we heard about. And then consider out of the box and innovative, progressive ideas. So if we're going to grow, let's do some cool stuff. Let's do some stuff that's really unique and that's, not just like any other place. And so that's, I was really excited to hear that because we years ago worked on a plan for James Campbell Corridor. And when we did that process, you hadn't had as much of the, the growth that you've had now. And it's, there's a real hesitation and concern, I think, about new ideas or doing something different. But here, fast forward, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, however long it's been, that was one of the things that came up. People have said, let's do something cool. Let's do something out of the box and innovative. So how do we do out of the box and innovative without losing Columbia in the process and what's important to you all? So leads me to this, which is, in my opinion, the most important slide of the entire presentation. We need to make sure that whatever we do, this zoning ordinance update, this code, embodies the essence of Columbia. And we're going to have to make sure that's, that's really what your main role is, in my opinion. I mean, there's many things that you all will help us with, I'm sure, but for me, this is the most important thing because this is the thing that we can't do on our own. If we just said, oh, we're going to go write a zoning ordinance and not ask any public input, we could do that. But getting the essence is important. So going to wrap it up here. I'm turning it over to Becky. Becky's going to walk us through the timeline and next steps, and then talk to us about how to have a conversation on this Zoom technology. Unmute.
I got it. Thanks, Brian. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I can advance the slides on my end, so I may need you to do that for me.
Sure.
Let's go ahead. All right, so this is our timeline. Right now, some of these, sorry, I've got two instances of me in this meeting, and it was echoing back. So right now we're kind of in the middle of phase 2, phase 3, and getting ready for phase 4. So we've already begun the project coordination process. We had some meetings with city staff, learned some initial information about the city, developed an outreach and engagement plan, which has been an ever-changing strategy with COVID happening right around the time that we launched this project. So it's been keeping us on our toes, trying to find new ways to engage with the public. The project kickoff is what we're doing right now. We've already branded the project, launched the website. Everyone here who has registered for the Zoom meeting has been to the website, so you've all seen it. Make sure to keep checking back there. The preparation and analysis portion is already well underway. We've already done, like Brian said, a review of the zoning ordinance. We've begun the synoptic surveys and done the zoning translation. So all of that is underway. And then Planapalooza is right around the corner. So this is an event that is typically an in-person event. You are our first virtual Planapalooza, so we're very excited about this. We've been working on strategies to do online meetings and some cool map exercises and things like that. So you'll start to see more information about that on the website, but mark your calendar, September 17th to 21st. We will have a full schedule up by the end of this week, so you'll see what will be going on. After that, we will go back to our respective offices and be working on drafting the client draft of the code, which will go to the city for their review before we release it as a public review draft. And at that point, that'll be a time that everyone will have an opportunity to review it, make sure that we've done everything we've intended to do and we've met your goals for it. And then once we've done the public review and received comments back and made changes, we'll make revisions to it, and then it will be ready for adoption. So then it'll go through your public meeting and public approval process. Go ahead, Brian. All right. So one of the things that we're launching tomorrow, or actually today, because it's on the website right now, is our On the Table event, I guess you would call it. And this is something that we've done for many previous projects, but something that is even more appropriate now in our new era of social distancing. It's a way of having smaller scale meetings among friends, family, colleagues, organizations that you're already a part of. If there are already groups that you are spending time with socially in person, then that's a great opportunity to have one of these meetings, or you can do it as a virtual meeting. There are a lot of ways to do that. You could set up Zoom, you could use Facebook. There's a lot of ways that you can meet virtually, or you could sit outside and space yourselves apart and have a meeting. So we're encouraging anybody who is interested in this project and interested in having a conversation about zoning and the future of Columbia to host a meeting. There are host packets on the website. You can download that and it'll give you all the information about the project, and then prompts for different conversations that you can have. You can talk about something specific. If you just want to talk about architecture, you can do that. If you want to talk about all things code related, you can do that too. We just ask that if you want to hold one of these meetings, that you do it sometime in September, because this is when our big push for public input is. And then you report your thoughts back. So you'll see if you download the packet, it's got some questions there while you're filling the answers, but then we'll also have a results survey on the website for folks that hold a meeting. So it's a good way to get people talking. You know, a nice way to talk to your neighbors, see if everybody's on the same page about issues, or if people have just differing points of view. It's a nice way to get people talking. So we encourage you all to do that.
Yeah, one of the things that's nice about this too is that it works really well with the Zoom format. If you're hanging out at home, you're not going out and being with other people. Lots of people will do these sort of like a happy hour, invite everybody to jump on Zoom, and they'll run through this as just kind of a fun, thing you can do with your friends, and when you're looking for something to do sometime.
I think most people at this point have attended either a Zoom happy hour or a Zoom birthday party or a Zoom meeting. So.
Yeah.
All right, and then like I said, the next thing is the virtual Planapalooza. We're going to have online presentations. There's going to be some interactive mapping exercises, some topical technical meetings. We'll release those topics with the full schedule, discussions on the web. Keep checking back on the website. There are going to be new survey questions and new polls and things posted. We'll do a show and tell with the consulting team throughout the 4-day event, where we'll have times that we hop on Facebook Live or Zoom Live, and you can tune in and we'll show you what we're doing and let you ask questions. And then we'll do live Q&As for our online presentations as well. Go ahead, Brian. Okay. like I said, I'm sure y'all have been on the website already, but keep checking back there. Make sure that you're registered for the website because we've also sent out an email through there, and we'll continue to send out emails through the website. And then the Tell Us What You Think section is where you'll find all of those surveys and exercises. And then there's a new On the Table page. It's just below about the project and Tell Us What You Think. If you scroll down, you'll see that. So keep sharing your ideas. All right, so now we're going to do a Q&A. We don't have a huge group here, so I think it's going to be pretty easy to manage. There's a couple of ways that you can ask questions. If you see the chat down below, it looks like we've already got somebody asking a question there. You can click on that chat button. You can type your question in there. We'll go through them. You can also just unmute yourself or turn your camera on. It would be great to see the faces of the people asking questions. And then I'll see on the list if you've unmuted yourself and can just run through and take turns. I'll call on you to ask your question. So I'll give everybody a minute to do that if they'd like to. The question that we have right now is, how are you intending to target outreach to those desired retirees that you're trying to draw to the community? So that's a good question. What we've done so far is a lot of online research, online outreach. We are also counting on word of mouth, people spreading the word. If you know retirees in the community, to make sure that you're telling people about the project. We're also putting up flyers around the community. Christina, if you'd like to unmute yourself and have any other specific questions or ideas, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be super helpful is to hear if you have any thoughts about how we can reach out to people, because what we know is what works in one community doesn't work in another necessarily. Sometimes it does, thankfully, but it's shocking the amount of how variable it is, how you get people's attention in any given place.
Oh, I don't see anyone else unmuting. You also, if you're on the phone, there's also a raise hand option. But I think just by unmuting, we'll be able to get your question. I don't want to miss out on anybody who may have struggles with the Zoom technology or anything. If you're trying to figure out the unmute, you can do one of two things. You can actually hold down your space bar and say something, and that'll unmute you for a second temporarily. Or if you go to the upper right corner of your picture, you can hit the blue unmute button. Oh, someone is saying they don't think that you can unmute.
Let's see. Oh, maybe we have it locked. Let's see how we. Can you change that, Becky?
I only have a mute all. I don't have a unmute all. Oh, wait. Okay. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Sorry about that, everyone.
Yeah, what a mean trick, Becky. Anybody who just broke their space bar, we apologize.
I'm sorry. Let's see. We do have a couple other questions coming in through the chat. What is the best way for developers to interpret the master plan so they understand expectations before buying property with building intentions?
Yeah,
go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say that's a good question. So through this process, we're going to be really getting into the rules and regulations that support the vision and the guiding principles that are in the Connect Columbia plan. And so I think really sort of twofold, one being part of the process here to give us feedback and give us input on what are the things that are confusing right now about it. How can the zoning ordinance begin to clarify what you're looking for or what's challenging. And then also too, really we use these sort of the whole process here while we're updating the zoning ordinance as a way to further refine and clarify what people meant in the comprehensive plan process. Sort of what are the more specific features of that the zoning ordinance would get into. If you know, using a particular piece of property as an example, say, well, hey, you know, like we'll hear from somebody will come to one of the Planapalooza meetings or something and say, hey, you know, I have this piece of property. It's been in my family for, you know, 200 years, and we're to the point now where we want to develop it. But we're not developers, or, you know, and this is all Greek to me. I don't understand what this is even saying. And so we can, you know, either, you know, Paul and his staff can get in there with you and explain it more, or, you know, we'll sit down together and all walk through it.
Yeah, Brian. So typically what we do is actually every Wednesday we host pre-application meetings with anybody looking to develop a piece of property, or just what can we do with this piece of property. Those work out really well. We outline the processes and what the current allowances are for that property, and talk about the comprehensive plan and future uses for the property. And occasionally you get people that run across a really good deal on a piece of land and buy it ahead of time, and then kind of have to struggle through the process at that point. We're trying to make it fit with what they're wanting to do there. But for the most part, it works really well. Everybody's up front and everybody kind of understands each other. This is what's expected for that piece of property based upon the ordinances that we have at the time.
So there was a second question from that same person. Should step one start with meeting the community or meeting the zoning commission?
Well, I'll give you my opinion on that, and Paul may have some thoughts as well. But, you know, typically, since we work with developers as well as with cities, when we're working on the developer side of a project, what we typically would want to do is we'd sit down with, you know, planning staff and say, you know, hey, what are you guys thinking? What do you have in mind? Usually try to come with some specific questions about the zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan. Say, hey, you know, this is unusual to us. We didn't understand what that meant, or whatever. Or does this really mean what I think it means? And then what we try to do is we encourage all of our developer clients, or even just developers who are working in cities where we're working on the for the city, like on a zoning ordinance or comprehensive plan, to be as open and transparent as they can. You know, it's like sometimes there's, you know, specific things with the land deal or whatever. You can't just go say, here's what we're trying to do. But you know, for so long, developers have you know, really just avoided conversations with the community, because most communities are fearful of development, and so they, you know, have either, you know, sort of like, oh no, there's one of those developers. And what we realize, and we try to help people realize, is that if not for developers, there wouldn't be a city. And, you know, even from the earliest days, you know, people build things speculatively, and that becomes your city. And so thank goodness they did it right back in the day. And so, you know, there's sometimes when development comes through that people aren't excited about, and so they kind of get a bad taste in their mouth towards developers. So what we always try to do is you know, have a public process for our private development projects. We actually have a Planapalooza for them, and we invite everyone to the table. Say, hey, who wants to come? You know, the zoning allows this. The comprehensive plan supports doing something different with the land than it is today. What's missing? How could we add to the city? If we're going to do development, you know, how can we get something that you're excited about, or even a place that you might want to live or have a business or something like that? And so I think going to the community as quickly as possible is good, but really usually starting with the planning department is my recommendation. You agree with all that, Paul, or am I off base?
Yes, sir. So typically we encourage us to come into planning staff first. The concept that they're looking at may not work with the ordinances or the comprehensive plan. And really it's sensitive for each case is a little different. Sometimes there's a high impact of the community, and we encourage them to go and have a town hall meeting on their among the community and themselves before submitting to planning commission. And sometimes there's just very low impact or just not much in that area, and we'll just go straight into the commission review of it. So every case is a little different.
Sure. I was just going to go into the next one. So I think Heather, or I can see your picture there. Hello. There's a question about retirees, and the retirees that we're trying to draw. How can they be from outside Columbia or just from local areas? At the end of the day, the zoning ordinance, doesn't dictate that. They can be, anybody can come from wherever they want to, as far as the zoning is concerned, and even the comprehensive plan. I think that right now you guys have been getting lots of growth from outside. And I think that really what we're trying to do is make sure that in the process of that, you don't lose who you are, who the city is, what made the place exciting or special to those who already live there. So how do you get the best of that growth? Think back to, when the city was first founded, and they're trying to, go from, little houses and stuff to making their first commercial and mixed use buildings and doing all these things as a place grows and progresses over time. And people used to be so excited about growth. They say, oh, this is great. Now we've got enough people to have a movie theater. Oh, this is wonderful, and so how do we get back to that kind of that mindset of where, people are excited about growth because they're getting stuff that's meaningful to them, not just to the new people. So people from anywhere, I think. But we also, some places we go, we like Pinehurst I mentioned, and we've worked in some other places that are more like resort oriented. So it's really nearly all about people from out of town rather than locals. And so you've got to figure out, how do you balance that? How do you, when you're in a place that, has tourism, for instance, how do you get the tourists to come to patronize the shops and all that stuff so that they can stay in business, so that when the tourists aren't there, they're there for you. And so you're sort of getting the best of both worlds. They come spend their money and then go away. So there's all sorts of things to think about through this process.
I can jump on this next question.
Sure.
What information from the community are we looking for? Most people don't think about or know much about zoning. And yes, I think that's probably true. I think most people probably aren't really aware of zoning. I think property owners, developers, business owners probably know a lot about it and how it affects them and have strong opinions about the zoning right now. I think most people probably don't. If they haven't run into any issues with zoning in the past. So what we're trying to do through this process is sort of show people how the zoning does affect them and how the zoning does shape Columbia. So we're going to start having, right now we're just asking for general questions. If you've got questions about the project or something specific that you know about the zoning or have a question about the zoning, but we're also going to start having specifically targeted discussions about certain topics, or show people how the zoning affects them. So if you keep an eye on those tools that we're going to be posting online, we'll talk about things in more specific detail. The next one is, what's the main goal we're trying to accomplish? Just rewriting the zoning ordinance, or a long-term building plan for the city, or something else? So our project right now is updating the zoning ordinance. So a long-term building plan for the city isn't something that we're being specifically tasked with, but there is going to be a planning component to this project. So Brian can tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've learned over the years, that when you talk to people about, things like zoning, unless they've specifically been involved in, development, or had an issue with something that made them look into zoning, or, it's not something that the average person thinks about normally. And usually if they've had an opportunity to be involved with zoning, somehow it hasn't been a good experience. And so what we want to do is really have people understand, like Becky said, how the zoning relates to their life. And so what we found is, rather than just talking about it and talking about even things like the synoptic surveys that I mentioned, when we go do those measurements, we don't just document the height and width and setbacks and uses and all of that. We take pictures of it too. And so through this process, hopefully you'll actually learn some of the specifics about your city that you didn't even know. Just because of the way that we look at it as planners. And so we figured out that we may say, okay, well, we're looking at setbacks being about like this in this part of the city. And, you know, we've heard that people want that part of the city to have some of these walkable and mixed use features that we, you know, hear about. And, you know, and people say, you know, I keep seeing stuff about that walkable and mixed use. And, you know, I don't even know what that means. And so what we actually will do is we'll take, through our process, that, you know, community will say, well, here's an area over here or something that we'd like to see, you know, change or protected or whatever. And so we'll actually do some planning. We'll draw some plans and have our artists do some renderings of that. So you can actually see, like, oh yeah, you know, if we do this and implement these ideas that we've been hearing about or that your comprehensive plan talks about, here's what you get, what that, you know, kind of yields. And so you can go like, oh, wow, that's so awesome. That's exactly what we had in mind. Or, oh, I don't know, that doesn't feel like Columbia to me. And so it gives us a way to not count on each person's own sort of interpretation of whatever words that I'm saying or Becky or Paul or even their neighbors are saying. You can say, like, we're all looking at the same thing. We all have the same image in our mind, and now we can respond to it. And so those plans and the renderings that we draw aren't intended to be, you know, proposals for development. You know, even though we do work for developers, sometimes we aren't working for developers here. We're working just for the city and for all of you. And so when we draw those plans, it really is just to show potential, you know, what something might look like. And in some cases, we won't even pick a particular property. We'll just say, you know, we'll go through a process of doing sort of a prototypical thing. What does a walkable neighborhood look like? And we'll draw it, we'll design that, and, you know, share that with, and, you know, invite you all to participate in that process as we move forward. So that's part of this. When you see the word design workshop or Planapalooza, that's part of what we do during that time.
Okay, the next one is, it would be helpful to have overviews of the current zoning regulations and Columbia Connect to better provide targeted feedback on how to improve. I believe that Connect Columbia has a summary at the beginning. I believe it has like an executive summary. So that one does have something. The zoning regulations, I don't believe that they do. So
I think, you know, really part of what we'll do through this process is we will, you know, share some of the background stuff that we've been doing through this. I mean, some of it your eyes would glaze over if we got into it too much. So we want to make sure you all come back and participate in the next event instead of saying, oh man, I've been having insomnia lately, but he sure cured that. And so, yeah, go ahead, Becky.
No, I was just going to say, and I don't want anyone to feel like not knowing about zoning should be a barrier to participating. There is no question too highbrow or lowbrow. We will answer all of your questions. We are used to talking to people who know a whole lot about zoning and know nothing about zoning. So we're happy to have everyone participate.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as we go through together, you know, really understanding, and as we share with you, kind of like, oh, here's some of the things we found. We're not going to make you, you know, read the whole, you know, analysis that we did of the zoning ordinance, but we're going to share with you some of the things that we noted. It's like weaknesses and things that we're going to really be focused on fixing and improving and all of that. And so as we go through this process, we'll have, you know, a lot more opportunities to be more, you know, eye to eye, more involved, you know, in the details of the zoning and the comprehensive plan. And also too, I mean, that's Paul and his staff. They're great. They're really good at explaining stuff. And, you know, if you haven't met Paul before, he's super friendly. He's super nice. And so you can ask him anything.
Speaking of Paul, where and when on Wednesdays are those pre-app meetings?
They are actually at City Hall on the first floor. There, you would just schedule the meeting time with our department. You can contact myself through email, paul@columbiatn.com, or you can call the office at 560-1560, and we schedule those out. Normally, we try to keep it to an hour because every Wednesday we are booked from 8 a.m. to basically 4 o'clock. meeting with pre-application on those. Sometimes, though, it doesn't require that. The pre-application, while we're talking about a little bit, our typical process is you will have myself, the director, the city planner, city engineer, the fire marshal, and the building official all sitting in the same room with you. So you've got all the divisions and all the bases covered for any kind of development that you would like to do or use for the property. It just eliminates a lot of going to different departments. You can hear from everybody all at once and kind of get a good grasp of what you'll be expected to present and some of the things that you may have to overcome in order to complete that development.
And just to clarify too, you don't get all those people to come sit down with you, and when you just want to know more about the zoning ordinance, right, Paul? That's like when you're
right.
Development.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, if it's just the zoning ordinance, yeah, it's going to be myself or the city planner, Austin Brass. You can call us, you can email us if you want to schedule a time. We can do that really at any time during the week. The Wednesday meetings were just strictly for people looking to land use questions or physical development of their property.
All right, Paul, I think there's going to be a few more for you to answer here. How soon can community members know that developers are interested in building in their neighborhoods?
Sure. So public notice is different depending on the request. The way it is currently structured. The bigger the request, the more impact of the request, the more notice is required by the current zoning ordinance. If the property is currently zoned to do the construction they're requesting, then really the notice is more just published in the paper. The entire agenda is published in the paper. Also, I believe it's on our website. If there is a change in use, if there's a rezoning, they want to go to something different than what's they currently have the rights for, that's when you see the increase in notice. So at that time, we'll actually post the property with a sign. Then we'll also send certified letters to the adjacent property owners along with putting it into the paper and on the website.
Okay. The next one is, if we have specific questions regarding us individually or creative ideas to help the city and families in general, who do we need to contact to discuss these ideas and questions? I assume that you means Brian and myself, Paul, or someone on city council. So any of the above. There are a couple ways on the website that you can submit ideas. Right now, under the Tell Us What You Think section, there is a big ideas stories tool where you can post big ideas there. You can also contact Paul directly. His email address and phone number are on the website. He will pass any information on to us. And then during Planapalooza, there will also be opportunities to talk directly to us then. And we'll also have a general, actually, I think we already do have a general questions thing set up on the website in the About section. Yep. If you go to the About page on the website, there's also a place to ask questions there. So there's a bunch of different ways you can use any of them, and we'll make sure that all the information is shared between us.
And the reason why there's so many different ways is because we really do want to know what your ideas are. And that those ideas from individual citizens are the things that really do help us make sure we're capturing what's unique about this place. Because even if it's just an idea you have, it's a lot of times there's a Columbia reason why you have that idea, and so that's what we try to look for, like the motivation and why people think what they think and have the ideas that they have. Sometimes people have ideas and they say, you know what, I went to this city one time and they had the coolest Space Needle. We need a Space Needle in Columbia. Or they say, you know what we really need is a catfish restaurant on the square. Whatever the thing may be, if somebody says we need a Space Needle, I say, well, tell me about that. What was it you loved about that other Space Needle? And, how do you think that would be helpful in Columbia? And why do you think you don't have a catfish place on the square? Or, those are the kind of things that we try to not just think, what is the idea, but why is the idea?
Hopefully that answered that one. The next one is, as you evaluate zoning and consider what density may be provided for in the future, how are community resources, specifically healthcare and education capacity, considered to make sure future plans for those resources align with the zoning plans? I'm going to let Paul answer that one because our task right now is just doing the zoning ordinance. So we're not getting into the healthcare and education side of it.
But it
That
ties
is,
into sort of
it is something we do in our comprehensive planning world.
right. I was going to say that really is more of a comprehensive plan level discussion. So Paul, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a loaded question there with the healthcare portion of it. I'm not for sure if that means just the overall mental health and physical health of our community, or actually the service of healthcare, such as hospitals and clinics and things of that nature. But I guess the market kind of handles that part if we're talking about just the service side of it. We let the market handle that based on the need of our community. We're pretty fortunate in the fact that we are considered a medical hub for our region. And let's see, what was the other part on the education part? So on the education, we actually, for all of our requests that are going to change, it goes back to that where we're changing in zoning, where we're going to go either more times than not, it's going to be a more dense environment. We always solicit from the school system for their input. Now, sometimes that input varies, and sometimes it's just telling what the capacity is in the schools, but that information is then relayed to the Planning Commission and City Council. So it's very important. I know it's something that our former chairman, who I think might actually be on here tonight, took a real personal a venture with that to really push the school system to start giving quality feedback, because it was affecting them, and thought that maybe some effort was not there. So that's we do have a new superintendent, so we'll see where that goes. But we do try to solicit from actually all different services, whether it's fire, police, sanitation, water, sewer. They all have the ability to give comments on whether they can service that particular request.
Yeah, one of the things too, just to add to that, Paul, is that, you know, in our work around the country, we see some communities that are sort of just as a place, like kind of the worst place ever, but they have the best school systems. You can't even imagine how great the schools are. And so people move there. You say, well, why did you decide to live here? And they say, oh, the schools. That's, you know, we're all about educating the kids. And what happens is on graduation day, all the for sale signs go up in everybody's yard. It's not a place they want to stay. They just want to educate their kids and move on. We go to other cities that are the most amazing cities, just places where you just want to be and just roam around, just because they're so wonderful. But they have terrible schools, and so, you know, it has a real impact on that. And so one of the things that, you know, through our, as Becky mentioned, some of our comprehensive plan experience, is that, you know, we can do all kinds of things to improve the physical form of a place with the zoning ordinance. But a lot of that other stuff is really, you know, higher level policy kind of discussions, but important to think about moving forward and making sure that, you know, whatever the requirements are for new developments, that you're looking at, you know, what are the impacts, you know, on your infrastructure, not just your physical infrastructure, but your you know, sort of programmatic infrastructure as well. And when you're looking at some places we go, and when they're, especially places that aren't wanting to grow, people say, oh, well, you know, we look what happened where, you know, we have portable classrooms or whatever the case may be. And you say, okay, well, you know, all the other things that you're interested in and that you know, require you to move forward and to grow. One of the things that, you know, maybe needs to happen is that your infrastructure needs to grow along with the demand, because the development, if it's, you know, if it's done right, the development's paying for itself. And so, you know, limiting your, can you imagine if you were limited by the original, water system that you had when the town was founded, right? It would be, you'd be kind of a different place than you are today. And so looking at how you grow and not just, having those sort of infrastructure concerns limit you, but making sure that you're being really, really smart and proactive about it, so that you don't let it, development outpace what you can service, for sure.
All right, there's one more. This is a good question. How can we best handle the education gap between a developer / zoning board member who's educated about this versus us as a community members who typically don't know much about building, zoning, economics, etc., but have a vested stake in all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I hope is, at the end of the day, having gone through this process together, you won't have to bridge the gap. It won't matter. So, and here's what that means. So, assuming that what's in the comprehensive plan reflects the vision for the future that the community has adopted, and assuming that as we've gone through this process specifically, and we've talked about what you like development to look like physically, not just what a building looks like, not just, because you see, one of the things that cities most cities are really strict about, and the fattest part of their zoning ordinances are the sign standards. For whatever reason, cities are happy to regulate the heck out of signage. Anything else, not so much. I don't want to tell people what their building needs to look like too much, but their signs, oh yeah, we'll tell them what it looks like. I don't know why. That's just the way it is in most places. And so what I always say to people is, you're so worried about those darn signs. Have you seen the building it's attached to? Or have you seen the whole place where the building is that it's, and so really what we want to do is make sure that the physical form of the city and that the character, that's what you'll hear that word 1,000 times through this process, character. What is the character of the future of Columbia that you want to see? And once we can synthesize that, we can boil it down and really make sure we understand that and that's dialed in, the zoning ordinance will be written to reflect that vision, and you won't have to know anything else. Do you like this vision? Do you like these images and these things that we talked about during the process? Well, the new zoning ordinance is going to make that the reality, and you shouldn't have to get up to speed on it all. Hopefully, though, through this process, we'll get you there too. Just so, we'll teach you about zoning more, even hopefully tonight, and this just broad brush, high level stuff we've talked about. Hopefully, each of you has maybe learned something, and hopefully, as we go through the process, you'll learn more. But each time you come with specific questions, and if you want to, I wouldn't spend too much time with the old ordinance, just because it's the old ordinance, and hopefully, what you by the time you have waded through that document, you would have been better off waiting for the new ordinance and spend your time learning that one and understanding that one. And so I think really what we want you to do is take the things that you already know. You already know the city. You already know what you like, what you don't like, how you wish things could be. You don't have to learn anything about that. Take all that stuff and teach us, educate us, bridge the gap in our knowledge so that the zoning ordinance can reflect what it is that you want to have this place be. And then we'll make it simple. You can go and enjoy your evenings. You don't have to come on Zoom meetings like this.
There's a follow-up just got posted to that one. The economic factor is the biggest part of what I'm getting at. If we let XYZ in, we should expect ABZ economic impact. Hopefully we can get some guidance there.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the zoning ordinance, we don't get into that level of detail. I mean, part of some of our other projects where we're working on comprehensive plans, and there's a whole return on investment analysis that can be done, where you can literally look and say, well, based on the vision from the comprehensive plan, here are the potential impacts and benefits of growth of a particular kind. Usually it's done on a project by project basis. And so you have, like, we just were here in Franklin, like I said, we just did the zoning ordinance, but we also just did a new private development project. And one of the things that we had to do was to, show, the developer had to show what the impacts were going to be on traffic. So they had to have a traffic study as part of their development submittal. And then the traffic study said, well, here's, what the issues are going to be at these intersections. And so they had to actually pay to improve those intersections. And then they said, well, here's how many school kids you're probably going to add. And so that's, here's what the, the impacts are in the school system. Some communities are much more focused on those sort of developer impact fees. In some states we work in, it's not legal to even do that. And so that'll be something we'll be looking at together. But this process and this project, won't give you, the specific answers you're looking for. What we're going to do is make sure that we set the stage so that any development you get that, meets all of the goals, the criteria, and all of that stuff is the development that you want. When we look at, when we work in New York, they have this really complicated process called SECRA, and it's some environmental, it stands for something environmental, quality, and you have to, basically look at all the impacts, not just environmental, but what are the economic impacts going to be on the city if you change development and do something new. At the end of the day, the way that we think about planning and zoning isn't like the 2020 plan or the 2020 zoning ordinance. We're planning for, the far foreseeable future of the city. What we hope is that we write this thing so well that you don't ever have to change it, until like you guys decide you want to become, the Jetsons or something, and, have it be totally different. And so we're going to make sure that whatever development you get is going to first and foremost be, within that, range of character and quality that you're looking for. And a lot of times, when people say small town charm, usually the next thing they say is, we're not trying to become a big city and have skyscrapers here, right? Well, automatically, your small town charm, that character element, is a limiting factor. It starts to limit how high, how much you get. And so that has an impact on, what impacts developments have in the future. So if you're really into the numbers and all of that stuff, hopefully you won't be frustrated with this process, because we don't get into that. That's just not part of our scope. But I know that Paul and the rest of the city have thought through a lot of that going forward in the past, and it'll be part of the discussions going forward. So when you have specific questions about it, let's bring them, let's talk about it. And each time we say, hey, well, what about this? You say, well, we need to make sure we're thinking about that economic impact, hold everybody accountable on that regard as well.
I think that's it for questions.
This is great. Well, it's not ideal not being able to meet in person and say hello to all of you. And yep.
We just had a question pop up.
Oh, great.
Before you wrap it up, all the city wards and urban growth boundary areas are also in county districts. What will the city planning staff and city council do to include discussion, Q&A, and feedback from all the county commissioners? Paul, I'll let you handle that one.
I guess, it's a great question, and it's very true. While we do have a lot of available land within our city limits, and I hope that's where we really start to focus more of our efforts as we move forward, instead of continually trying to annex and start to change some of our rural landscape as much as what we've been doing in the past. County commissioners, the commission as itself has the exact same opportunities as any community person in the county or city. So I think that's what's great about the process is that it really doesn't matter who you are or actually where you live at within the community. You have a voice in this process, and what you're saying will be recorded and noted. And as we go through it, what you say today may have a big impact on how we develop out in the future. Because I think that's a point that gets missed sometimes, is that this current zoning ordinance that we're in is gosh, it's almost 20 years old. So what we're developing right now is going to affect the way our community is going to look for the next 20 to 30, even longer, as far as years are concerned. So it's very important. It's very important for everybody to tell everybody they know, you need to come, you need to go to this website, you need to participate, because it's only going to be here for a short time period, and then this is going to be the document that's going to continue the pattern cycle that Columbia is to have in the future.
Yeah, and one of the things to remember too is as we go through this process, I mean, right now, we've got a decent number of people on here for a Monday night Zoom meeting to talk about zoning. So I'm encouraged because just a couple of days ago we only had 7 people registered, I think. But we're going to count on you all not only to help us with understanding the character, but also to get the word out. Like next time you come, like I want to have 4 more squares around you. We want this to be Brady Bunch style. Everybody's looking up and looking at their friends and participating, and it's really important. We'll never get a huge portion of the population. We don't in any given city, no matter how robust the public outreach process is. But the more people we get, the better. But the thing that's really amazing is when you get there, a certain number of people, I always say if we can have at least 10 people who participate in the Planapalooza, for instance, and 10 is a tiny number, by the way, it's always way more than 10. But if I only had 10, as long as they don't all come together and meaning they all know each other and they all rode together and so they all think the same things, then we nearly can figure out with even a group that small where we need to go. What we'll do as part of our process typically is have sort of roundtable discussions and stuff, and each group will present its ideas and things for everybody to hear. And let's say we have 10 tables worth of people, and each table has 8 people at it or something. And by the time you get to about the 3rd table presenting their big ideas, you start hearing all the same things again. And it's great, and it's really reassuring to people because people think, well, how in the world can we possibly update the zoning ordinance if we only have 200 people participate in the process? It's remarkable, but the process is set up so that we hope that we can get, and with Zoom, I mean, for heaven's sakes, we can get thousands and thousands of people, but it really just depends on everybody assuring their friends and family that it's not horrible, that we really do want to hear what they have to say and we need their input, because even though we're not from far away, I don't know Columbia well enough to do this on our own. So.
All right, we had a couple more come in. Is this going to be posted anywhere? Yes, this will be on the project website, columbiaforyou.com, within the next couple of days. I have no idea about the second part of that question. Is the state fair being moved to Columbia? That's not within our purview, so no idea. And then promoted on the Muletowner. I don't know if you're referring to the state fair or the project itself, but I know that we'd love to get the project promoted. Yes, great. We'd love to get the project promoted in the Muletowner, so I would encourage you to contact Paul, or Paul can contact you, and we'll make sure you get all the information.
Awesome. So, we had a couple of questions for all of you to think about, and as Becky said, there's different places where you can go to provide input. Just go on the web page and type down some of your big ideas and things. But what we're looking for are what are good examples of development in and around the city, or the region, or even places elsewhere in the country where you go, what, like that's not Columbia, but that's pretty darn cool. If we had the Columbia version of that kind of development, that would be awesome. And then, is new development accomplishing your vision for the future? When you've been getting new development over the past several years, is it stuff that you're going, oh, golly, man, we missed the mark on that one. I sure wish we had our updated zoning ordinance. So that's helpful for us to know. And then also just your, hopes, dreams, fears, aspirations, and, some of this stuff, if you participated in the update of the comprehensive plan, you may have already talked about this stuff, but as time passes, as things change, as we end up having meetings now on computers, on Zoom, and all the different things that are going on in the world today, you may have changed your priorities or your hopes and dreams and aspirations or fears. Sort of updating that as well. So don't limit yourself. Any place you can find to give input. All the different sources that we've provided for you. Even if it says, "Hey, we want to know about this." You can put whatever you want to. We just want to know what you think. So, all right. Well, I appreciate it.
We have one wrap-up statement in the chat.
Oh, good.
Vice Mayor says, good questions and robust discussions for this first meeting. Thanks everyone who chose to join the Zoom meeting. I'm the Vice Mayor, Krista Martin.
Awesome.
I'd like to thank the handful of people who brought their faces to the meeting. That was very nice. We're used to having a big crowd full of people looking at us, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna start doing like all the sports events now. I'm gonna have little cardboard cutouts. I'm just gonna stick them on the squares when it's just people's names, so I can have a face with a name. Hopefully, it looks something like you. But in the future, yeah, if you have a camera, we love to have it turned on. And
Hey, there's another face.
Yeah, even take a picture of yourself. It's nice to, hey, there we go. I love it. It's like I just think back when I used to play music. You show up and you're playing to 4 or 5 people. It's not the same as playing to thousands of people. Hey, look! Oh man, somebody's coming in from Hawaii. Awesome. Oh,
all
man.
right. Well, next time we're going to encourage more video.
Great. Well, hopefully you guys have learned a little bit, enjoyed yourself enough to want to come back and participate. It gets even more fun as we go. This is really just the beginning. This is just an introduction to what's going on, to who in the world we are, and all of that. But it will get more and more exciting, more meaningful as we go. So I thank everyone for giving us your Monday night, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.